Stephanie.
And I'm Allison.
And this is Nerd of the Week, a randomly generated fandom podcast. Podcast, not podcast. We'll be better at that. It's fine. I know how to say words. Moving on. Generator, what's our word this week?
The word of the week is professor.
All right, Allison, are you going to guess what Google says professor?
I forgot that was the thing that I was going to do now. Yeah, I'd love to. A professor is a person of authority, of higher authority or knowledge who acts in a teaching position at a school or other educational institution.
That's pretty close.
Awesome, yeah.
It's a noun, a teacher of the highest rank in a college or university.
Nice. Cool.
I think you hit all the, keyword bullet points on that one.
I'm so proud of myself. I'm in sync with the Google.
Heck yeah. All right. So I have brought to the table Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, okay, cool. I was kind of thinking Indiana Jones when I first heard this word, so I'm glad you brought it.
Mm-hmm. Raiders, Indiana Jones, first movie of the series. It's a George Lucas film. I think it was specifically made with Harrison Ford in mind after the success of Star Wars and everyone loving Han Solo, so they wanted to see Harrison Ford in more things. And honestly, who doesn't want to see Harrison Ford in more things? So understood, fair enough. He released it through Paramount Pictures in 1981. It was the first Indiana Jones movie ever to be released and is considered to be chapter 24 in the Complete Adventures of Indiana Jones, which was a book that came out later that kind of fleshed out the universe a little bit more.
Okay.
Because George Lucas kind of made this as a B film and didn't expect it to take off, but that seems to be his thing, because Star Wars was also supposed to be more of a B sci-fi thing, and then it exploded into what it is now.
Yes, what it is now, the monster.
The movie is set in the early half of the 20th century, surrounding the archaeologist Indiana Jones, who is hired by the U.S. government to stop the Nazis from getting a hold of the Ark of the Covenant. Because I believe this was happening World War II time frame. I think it's 1936-ish is the time that the movie's supposed to be set in.
Okay.
We start with the first scene of the movie, and we are in a South American jungle with a group of people trying to get into a temple, and one guy is being attacked by another guy, and we get the silhouette of the classic Indiana Jones fedora, and then a crack of his whip as he stops a gun from going off. And then they go into the beginning of this ancient temple of the, I'm going to say this wrong, Chachapoyan warriors. And they're looking for the golden idol of fertility. And Indy, and his guide, whose name is Sapito, start going in, and every 10 feet, there's some crazy death trap. There's a wall that opens up with some spikes, and there's a guy that's stuck to it, and it's clear that Indy knows who he is, and he's and then says the guy's name, we were friends and now he's dead because he got attacked by spikes. There's a pit trap that Indiana has to use his whip to go over this trap, and then he sends it back for Sapito, who's not about using a whip to go across this trap. There's the things in the floor that then shoot out poison arrows. All the classic things that you think of as with Indiana Jones, raiding a tomb, is straight up the first 5 minutes of the scene. Mm-hmm. And then we get to Indiana finding on this pedestal in the middle of this room this very bright golden bowling ball sized idol, and Indy's standing there with his sandbag, and it's that scene where he takes the sandbag and then replaces it with or he first like judges its weight, and I don't know how you would judge the weight of something that's golden that could or could not be hollow just by looking at it.
Right.
And he just pulls the sandbag out of nowhere, like he just knows that we have to be weighted, and it's on this pedestal, and then he takes like a handful of sand out because like this handful's going to be the difference between the right weight or not, throws it off to the side, and then does the like slow hand replace the sandbag with the idol, or the idol with the sandbag, and then he's like, yeah, I did it. And then the pillar, which you assume is like pressure weighted, then starts to sink into the ground. And that has always, it's a really classic scene, but it's always bugged me, because if it was like a pressure plate, wouldn't it come up and not down? But
that's true.
I have a lot of minor grievances that I'm going to point out because I've watched this movie so many times. And I love this movie dearly, but there's just some things.
That's why it's a B movie.
It's why it's a B movie.
Or supposed to be a B movie.
Right. It's why it was made as a B movie. And then we have the classic, heavily parodied boulder scene that the pedestal like sinks into the ground. Indiana realizes he's done effed up, and then this giant rock boulder just comes out from the ceiling and chases.
Like it's at Disneyland.
Yeah. And chases him and Cepito through a narrow hallway, and then they get stuck in the door, and they've escaped this thing, but then the one door starts to slowly like close and like trap them in there, and Cepito's made it across the pit trap from earlier, but Indy hasn't. He goes, "Throw me the idol and I'll throw you the whip." And so Indy does, and then Cepito's like, "Goodbye, Mr. Jones," and then leaves.
Oh, no.
And then Indy then just, somehow the pit trap is now smaller than it was, and he just takes a running leap for it and just makes it. He does have like that slide, that classic, like, is he gonna make it scene, and then he has to like pull himself up with some vines, but he gets up and then darts underneath the closing door, and his hat almost doesn't make it, but he like reaches his hand underneath and grabs his hat real fast and puts it back on his head.
Gotta get that hat.
It's very important to his brand. So, like, all of, like, the classic, very parodied Indiana Jones stuff is, like, in the first 5 minutes of this movie. And I guess the boulder scene was almost cut out. Like, they weren't going to do it because it was so cheesy and ridiculous. But then when George Lucas saw the papier-mâché boulder, he was like, yes, I love this. We're keeping this.
He knew what would make a good film.
Right. People want happy, silly, cheesy nonsense. So Indy gets up and then starts to head out, and because Cepito didn't have Indy with him showing him where all the traps were, he gets caught on the spike trap.
Oh, no.
And
wait, is he alive or dead?
No, he dead.
Oh,
DD.
no. Sad.
Do not pass go. Do not collect the $300. You're done.
Do not collect the golden idol.
Do not collect the golden idol of fertility. And Indy gets to have the like reverse line almost immediately of "Adios, Cepito," and then he takes the golden idol and gets out of the tomb. And then, unfortunately, his arch nemesis Renee Belloc, who we don't know any of this, but he apparently is just his nemesis, shows up and is waiting for him outside with a bunch of locals from the area. And it's like, how fitting that I get to steal another thing from you. And then Indy's like, crap, because he's got him at gunpoint, and then all the locals have like their poison arrows like aimed on him. So Indy has to give the idol that he stole from the tomb to the guy who's now stealing it from him. And while they're having a little bit of banter, the guy's like, well, if only you could speak Jovitos. And then he turns around and like shows them the fertility idol, which these native people worship. So then they bow down to it. And Indy takes that second to like run off and get away, and shouting to a pilot, like, start the plane, get the plane running, as he's like booking it, being chased by natives who are shooting arrows at him. And then they get on it's like a little like puddle jumper plane that I think they take back to America. That's what's implied, at least, but would not have made that range, but that's neither here nor there. And they take off. And then the pilot has a pet snake in the seat or like, because it's like a 2-seater that's like open air, pontoon plane thing. And then Indy's like, there's a snake in your plane. And he's like, yeah, it's my pet snake. And so we get the character development moment of Indiana Jones hates snakes, because there wasn't a better way to show that. But, you know, we got a snake buddy that goes on all these flights with this guy.
All right.
Back in, I think we're in the United States. I'm fairly certain we're in the United States. We see that Indiana Jones is actually a teacher, which is where the word professor comes in. He's a professor at a school that's connected to a museum, and he's giving a lecture to a bunch of people who are keeping, like, the front row is clearly a bunch of chicks who are only taking this class to stare at Harrison Ford, and they're all like Google-eyeing him. As he's trying to talk about, I think it's truly the Ark of the Covenant, like he's talking about the way the dig was set up, or like people were looking for it and things like that, kind of setting the scene that he knows some stuff about this stuff. And then there's the scene with the girl in the front who's written "love you" on her eyelids, and so every time she blinks he can see her having written those on there, and he keeps trying to like not look at her and be like, okay, and then like trying to give a lecture.
Awkward.
Soups. And after a couple of minutes of this, his friend, and I believe the museum curator, Marcus Brody, comes in and just kind of stands in the back of the room to watch the lecture. The bell goes off and then people leave. And I'd like to point out that a male student from the group leaves him a green apple on his desk. And I only noticed that in a recent rewatching. And so it's like everyone in this class is taking this class to just look at Harrison Ford. So, just needed to point that one out, because I always find something else.
It doesn't seem ethical.
Right.
There's something weird about that.
Right. It was what, the 1930s? Apparently it was fine.
Okay.
So, after the students leave, Marcus brings a couple of people from Washington to see them. And they explain that the U.S. has intercepted a cryptic Nazi message from somewhere in Europe that mentions a Professor Abner Ravenwood, who was under the scrutiny of like German intelligence. They were being monitored, or they were monitoring him, probably for some of his knowledge. And it was like the group of the Nazis that were specifically looking for like religious artifacts and the occult and like all the supernatural stuff to see if they couldn't like harness the power of God and things like that. And so Indy had actually apprenticed under Abner Ravenwood, so he was friends with him for a long time. And then he even mentions like, you know, I haven't talked to him in 10 years. We had a bit of a falling out, but we were good friends before that, but I don't know where he is. And they were like, we're not accusing you of anything, but we're trying to find someone who might know where he is, because the Nazis are looking for the 10 Commandments and the Ark of the Covenant and stuff like that. So we get why Indiana Jones is now being tasked with what he's being tasked with. And we get kind of the couple of MacGuffins that we're looking for. They're looking for the headpiece to the Staff of Ra, and they think Ravenwood knows where it is, or he had it at some point. And the Staff of Ra is like a specific like medallion type thing with a gem in the middle that gets placed in a specific room that has a map of Tanis, which is this ancient Egyptian city. And when you put the staff at a specific angle at a specific time, the light beams and hits the part to tell you where the Ark of the Covenant is.
Oh my. Very complex.
Very complex. Very D&D style puzzles to find extra things. And so they have a long like nerding out about this, and then the two people from Washington are like, we clearly found experts, you guys are on it. And so Indy goes to Nepal, where he's pretty sure that's where his friend is. But our next scene, after he gets the okay from Marcus, and Marcus being like, I wish I could go with you, but I'm just too old now. We get a scene of two people in a drinking contest surrounded by a bunch of people betting on them. And there's a woman and a guy, and they have like clearly a bunch of empty shots in front of them. And there's like 4 more on the table, and they're going shot for shot to see who can take it. And the guy takes one, and then the girl takes one. And then she like almost faints for a second and then flips it over. And then the guy goes to take a third one and then just like falls over. Mm-hmm. And then the girl like stands up like, all right, give me my money. And everyone's kind of disappointed. And it turns out like she's the owner of this bar. So people are trying to outdrink the barkeep.
Oh.
And
I don't think they should do that.
No. Nope. And I think she was kind of playing it up. But it's one of those like character defining intro scenes, like so you can see like how this person is. Mm-hmm. They do a lot of that in this movie, where you get a lot of the character before you know who the character is and why they're important.
Okay.
And so this is Marion Ravenwood, who is the daughter of Indiana Jones's teacher Abner. And Indy comes in and she's like, I can't believe that, or I always knew you'd walk through my door again. And he's like acting all coy and excited, and then she just slugs him in the face. And he's like, what did I do? And she's like, I was a child. It wasn't okay. And you're like, wait, what? And so apparently they were a couple or an item when they were younger. And that's probably why Abner and Indy had a falling out, because he was trying to date his daughter.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And so Indy asks for the medallion. He's like, it's just like a useless like bronze like ring about this size with a gem piece that's kind of offset. You wouldn't happen to know where it is. And Marion's like, I might. I don't know. My dad had a lot of useless junk. He dragged me across the world looking for useless nonsense. Mm-hmm. And then they find out that Abner had died in a avalanche in Nepal looking for something, which is how she ended up here and kind of got stuck here. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, if you give me some money, I'll think about it. So he gives her $2,000, and she's like, all right, come back tomorrow. And he goes, why? And she goes, because I said so. So Indy's like, all right, I guess I'll come back tomorrow. So he leaves. And then like 14 seconds go by, and she sits at the bar, and she just pulls said medallion from under her shirt and around her neck, and is just looking at it like, clearly I have it, it's right here. Mm-hmm. And she hangs it on like a centerpiece on one of her tables, and putting her money like in a box. And then the Nazis who had been following Indy show up and are like, hey,
oh no,
we want the same thing that Indiana Jones wants. And she's like, why do you think I'd give it to you? And they're like, we can pay you more. And then the guy, they give her like a couple of seconds to agree, and she's like, nah, I'm not going to do it. The main evil guy says something along the lines of, well, I have ways of making people talk. And he pulls a stoke out of her fire, and then like 2 of the Nazis grab her. And then he comes up to her with like the hot metal and is like, I'm gonna force you to talk. And then Indiana Jones comes to save the day and uses his whip and gets the thing, or the stoker, and then sets the bar on fire.
Oh,
because you, as you do. And there's a good scene in there while he's fighting with a handful of the bad guys, and he gets like held to the bar as like the main villain like sets the bar on fire, and then he looks up at Mary and he goes, can I have a bottle of whiskey? And she's like, what? And she gives her the bottle of whiskey, and he uses it and clobbers the guy on the head behind him. I'm like, it had to specifically be whiskey, I guess. And
maybe he knows something about the glass that those bottles are made of. I don't know.
That's true. It was a thicker glass bottle. It hurts more when you get hit with whiskey. And He, like most of the bar is on fire, and they've killed most of the people, and the main bad guy, who I think his name is like Arnold or Tot or something. I don't think it's ever said in the movie. I think it's in the credits at the end, though. The one who tried to stab her with the hot poker, sees the medallion and like goes to reach and grab it, but it's too hot because it's metal and it's been sitting in fire, and he burns his hand and he runs outside.
Oh.
And then some things happen and the bar is on fire, and so they get out, but most of the Nazis are dead or have run away, and Marion's like, well, you owe me $5,000, so I'm your partner until you give me that. And he's like, why would I do that? And she's like, because I got this, because she picks up the medallion, but not grabbing it with metal. She's smart enough to like wrap it in a couple of like towels or something before she picks it up, and then like she's like, see, I have it. Then, for some reason, we go to Cairo, and it's the...
Because the Egyptians.
That's true. That probably makes the most sense, because the Egyptians...
But, I mean, I don't know if it actually makes sense.
I think that's
Does anything in the story make sense?
I mean, a little bit. There's bits and pieces. And then they... there's the map with the, like, the dotted line that everyone thinks of with, like, the plane as it, like, shows you the map. And has the dun 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 dun. The scene starts with Marion is like playing with some kids and a monkey, and they're like, okay, we'll keep the monkey. And she's like, no, you don't have to keep the monkey on my account. And they're like, nope, monkey's ours now. And then it kind of turns to Indy talking to his friend Salah, who's an Egyptian digger and helps people like dig out old tombs and things like that. And they're talking about how the Nazis have come in and tried to dig out a lot of places, and they don't pay very well, and he just wants them out of his country. They maybe have the headpiece because they had started aggressively digging in one spot, and they had kind of possibly figured out what the inscription said. And he's like, how is that possible? We have the medallion. And then it's because his hand got burnt with the medallion on it. And so Salah agrees to try to help them and says, give me a little bit of time and then we'll go and see if we can't like infiltrate and figure out how to get in there and find the map room and figure out where the Ark is. So Indy and Marion decide to go tour the markets for a little bit while Salah's getting stuff together. And then there's the crazy like swordsman fight where they get attacked by a bunch of mercenaries and then they're running all over these markets in Cairo. And there's the classic scene where there's one like guy with a bunch of swords and he's like spinning him around a bunch, and then Indy's like, I don't got time for this, and just shoots him.
Oh no.
And in this crazy havoc, we discover that the monkey is actually a Nazi. He is working for a guy on a motorcycle with an eye patch. And the monkey keeps like telling them where everyone is, so like it's always the monkey's fault that like they get discovered when they're hiding, or like they know the Nazis know exactly where Marion is and things like that. And watching it, I was
sounds like
oh.
Pirates of the Caribbean with the monkey Jack.
Mm-hmm. The monkey is not the monkey. Never trust the monkey.
Yeah,
the monkey's usually suspicious. So then we get Marion hides in a basket at one point, but the monkey points her out to the Nazis, and then they carry her away. And Indy tries to chase after her and ends up knocking over a bunch of people's baskets trying to find her. And then he turns the corner, and there's a bunch of stuff on fire, and he thinks Marion's dead.
Oh no!
And so he's despondent and goes and just starts drinking, and he ends up being found by some of the operatives that were chasing them, and ends up in the tavern where his nemesis is there, Belloc.
Oh.
And they're sitting there talking, and he's like, why do you even want this? Like, it's what it's going to do. And he goes, I want to talk to God. And then he has the most badass line where he's like, you want to talk to God? Why don't we meet him together? I've got nothing better to do. And he's like ready to fight him. And it's just like the coolest line. And then a bunch of kids just show up and are like, Uncle Jones, Uncle Jones. And then they like pull him away real fast.
Oh, gosh.
Sella had sent all like his army of children in to like grab Indy and steal him from that fight so that neither of them died. And there was like a bloodbath in this bar.
That's
and
good.
Sala's like, better than the U.S. Marines. These like small army of children. Sorry,
That's
Jonathan.
Awesome. We know you're listening, Jonathan.
And then the Indy goes like, Marion's dead, and Sala goes, I know, but we have to move on. Life continues, and you're like, okay, well, that was quick grieving for Marion. And the monkey, Indy's been taking the monkey because he doesn't realize the monkey's sus. And the monkey's like in the front of the truck that they're getting into. And the sketchy guy on the motorcycle that you would have absolutely seen on the street with the eye patch, like makes a little symbol to the monkey to like hide. So then the monkey like, okay, I'll stay here. And you're like, okay. So, Sala takes him back to his house or somewhere to hide out for a second because he's found some stuff. And he found an old man, whose name is Imam, and he decodes the pieces or the words on the markings or on the medallion. And it says how tall the staff should be on one side. And then when you flip it over, it says subtract 1 for the important god. So the Nazis actually have the wrong size of the staff.
Oh, good.
So because they only have the one side. And while this is happening, Eye Patch Guy sneaks in and poisons a bunch of their food and then runs away. And Jones and Sala are all excited and they are about to start eating to celebrate. And like Indy throws one of the dates up in the air to eat it. And Sala grabs it real fast and goes, bad dates. And then you look and the monkey had been eating the food and got poisoned and was dead next to the food. So they know the Nazis are onto them. So they have to be like undercover and like hiding.
The Nazis let their own monkey get poisoned.
They're the worst.
That's terrible.
Right? Then we go to the dig site where Indy and Sala are covering their face and hiding and trying to look like natives as they try to find the map room. And they discover that, or they do find the map room, and Indy jumps down and finds like the exact location of where the Ark of the Covenant should be. And while Sala like kind of stands guard, and then they get out, and while trying to like sneak through and get away, a couple of the Nazis are like, hey, bring us water. So they're pretending to go get water, and they enter a tent and they discover that Marion's alive. And Indy's all excited and happy, and he is going to release her. And then he realizes if he releases Marion, then everyone's going to know that they've come in and they figured everything out. So then he puts the gag back on Marion and he's like, sorry, I'll come back for you later. Okay, bye. And she's like, but what? No.
Oh, no.
Indy and Sala, under the cover of night, then go to the right location of where the Ark should be. And of course, for some reason, it's infested with snakes. Of course it is. And Sala looks down and goes, oh, asps, you can go first. And Indy's like, why did it have to be snakes? And so they go down and they use fire to like keep the snakes away. And they find the Ark, and Indy's like, we shouldn't touch it. It might have something magical or something on it. Like, let's just not mess around with this too much. So they use the 2 poles in the room to kind of lift it up and then put it into a crate. But then Belloc, the jerk, has figured out that Indy's there, and they see him, and then they trap them in the tomb with all the snakes, but they take the Ark away.
Oh, no.
And then they end up taking Marion because they don't need her anymore, and they drop her in there with them. And So Marion's like, how are we getting out of here? And he's like, I'm working on it. And then he figured out that the snakes had to have come into this room for somehow. So he looks around and there's like a scene with a bunch of snakes that probably, the poor snakes are probably being pushed through this hole.
Oh.
And they just keep like falling out of this one little hole in like the eye of like an Egyptian pharaoh or something.
Gross.
Right. And so they sneak out, and then they see that the Nazis are trying to put the Ark on a plane to fly it back to Germany. And they go to try to stop the plane, and Indy fights this like big muscular soldier while Marion tries to knock out the pilot. And then she gets stuck in the plane because like the top cover plastic part, like, or glass part drops down on her. So doing what she should do, she mans the machine gun and just starts shooting a bunch of things.
Oh my goodness.
So she sets the gasoline for the plane on fire, or like explodes it. She explodes a truck that's coming in. And then plane ends up, that one of the propellers ends up taking out the guy that Indy was fighting the whole time. And then Indy has to shoot the latch to get Marion out of the plane, and then they fly, or they like let the plane like taxi into another thing, which it then explodes, which of course it does.
Oh my gosh.
And then they meet back up with Sella, and they're kind of hiding on one side, and Indy goes, all right, you guys get back to Cairo. I'm going to go follow that truck, because now they put the Ark on the truck. And Sella goes, what are you going to do? And Indy goes, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. And that's a whole mood, isn't in and of itself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then the next scene is Indy has found a horse and is just straight up just charging after the convoy on this horse. And they're like, not once was there a horse in any of the like B footage action shots, but now there's a horse because we needed one. And Indy jumps onto one of the trucks carrying the Covenant, or the Ark, and has like a big battle scene with all of that going on. And they manage to take out like the two different parts of the convoy, and then so they get the Ark, and then it's supposedly safe. And Sala is all excited. They have a little bit of celebration back in Cairo, and then they get him on a boat with the Bantu Wind, I think is what the ship is called, and under Captain Katanga. And he's like, don't worry, I'll take care of them. They can stay in my captain's quarters, and then we'll get them back to the United States, and then the Ark will be fine, and then this mysterious power won't happen or anything like that. Unfortunately, as they go, you see a submarine, like, following the boat, and so you know the Nazis are coming and they're not done yet. And they have the scene with Marion and trying to fix up Indy, because in the chase scene he got injured, and she keeps trying to like clean his wounds, and she's like, dang it, Indy, what doesn't hurt? And he points to his elbow and he goes, here.
Oh,
my elbow doesn't hurt.
oh.
And it's just a cute scene, because then she kisses it, and then he's like, oh, okay, my forehead's okay, and then this isn't too bad, and then he points to his lips, and it's just like, I squee every time.
Oh my goodness. That's so cute.
It's so mushy, I die.
I love it. I love it.
It makes me die. It's so cute. I live for cute little romance.
Mm-hmm.
In the morning, the Nazi boat pulls up and boards the ship, and Captain Katanga pretends to have killed Indy to try to protect him and say that he had taken Marion hostage as his own, and tries to like protect her as well. But the Nazis are like, no, we're going to take her. We're taking all of your cargo, but we'll leave you alive because you did us a service and you killed Indiana Jones. So Katanga tried. He did his best. He was trying really hard to take care of his friend. And then as they're watching like the submarine go away, one of Katanga's shipmates goes, I don't know where Indy is. I've looked everywhere. And then he's like, well, look again. And then he looks out in the water and he goes, I found him. And Indiana Jones has jumped off of the boat and has swam in the ocean to the submarine that is slowly trying to resubmerge.
Oh my gosh.
Like a BAMF.
Does he make it?
He does. And then he sneaks on there, and then he gets into the ship itself, and one of the Nazis is like, who are you? Because he was trying to like steal some clothes, and so then he pretends to like be a Nazi for a second, and then he punches him, and then like goes undercover for a second because he's trying to find Marion. And so he in disguise follows them to wherever they end up. I don't know, there's some like land that they eventually end up on because they're going to go open the Covenant somewhere in like the desert for some reason before they bring it to Hitler. And
okay.
I've never actually understood that one. I think it was a conversation that Belloc and Indy had earlier where Indy had maybe suggested that if you open it in front of Hitler and there's nothing in there, Hitler will be mad. So I think it was like checking to make sure. So they go like make land somewhere just to like open it up and make sure that like it is actually worth bringing to him. And Indy finds a rocket launcher and is up above them as they're like walking through this like ravine type area. And he shouts, like, I just want Marion or I'll blow up the Ark. And then the scene that lives rent-free in my head is Belloc being like, well, fine, shoot it, as a bug on his chin, like, crawls into his mouth.
What?
Yeah. And it just, like, and the actor does not flinch. They keep this scene, and I watched this movie a bunch as a kid. We used to watch it like every year for Thanksgiving for whatever reason. I don't remember why, at my aunt's house. And I remember that scene and being so grossed out. And I like can just picture it at any time. So like every time it happens, I'm like, I still like just watch the bug. And I don't actually know what the words are. I'm just like, how did you not notice this bug on your face?
That's creepy.
Right? Which adds to the creepiness value, which is probably why they kept that shot. Because he's like, this guy's crazy. Mm-hmm. But, oh, God. Ugh, yuck. So...
yuck.
Somehow Indy's subdued, and then they get to, like, this little bit of a clearing, and they tie Indy and Marion up, and then they stand and open the Ark, and they're like, oh, there's just sand in there. But spoiler, there's not. It's actually like really angry spirits that are mad that you're looking at them. And then Indy shouts like, Marion, don't look no matter what happens, because apparently if you close your eyes, it's more respectful and you won't get your face melted off by the vengeful spirit living in the Ark of the Covenant. And then after that nightmare happens, somehow... Indy and Marion are free, and they give each other a hug, and then we're back in the United States, and Indy is getting a debrief saying that the Ark has been secured and is being researched by top men. And Indy goes, who? I probably know them. And he goes, top men. Like, don't question it. I'm authority. And so Indy's like, they're making a mistake. This is stupid. But he leaves because what are you going to do? And him and Marion go get ice cream. And... there's the last scene that's also a very classic Raider scene of the Ark in a pinewood box being shoved into some location just filled with all of those like random artifacts that we are apparently just hiding away so no one knows where they are.
Yep.
And that's Raiders.
Yay!
Yay. And
very good.
My favorite observation, which I was trying to pay close attention to, is that the whole movie of Raiders would have still happened with or without Indiana Jones. Because the Nazis still would have found Marion, they would have gotten the medallion, they would have taken the medallion, come to the realization they should have opened it before they brought it to Hitler, and then they would have all died. So...
yeah.
Indy's... may have slightly altered the course of the movie by just being there, but like he didn't need to be there.
That's sad for him, but yeah, very interesting plot point.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it was like interesting knowing that and like having heard that criticism and then watching it and going, yes, it's true, but he also acts as like a way to watch like this story. So, and it's still interesting, and he's got a bunch of great like one-liners and him just like with all of his action scenes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
All right. So I got 2 questions for you.
Okay.
All right, the first one is, what is Indiana Jones's real name? Is it...
I'm sorry, I didn't know he had a real name.
He does. He has a full name. Is it Dr. Emmett Brown? Is it Dr. Peter Venkman? Is it Dr. Henry Walton? Or is it Professor Severus Snape?
Well, not that one. Oh, gosh. I don't know. They're all so good. Potentially the first one?
Dr. Brown?
Yeah.
Dr. Brown is from Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
His full
Another
name
movie I've not seen.
Dr. Henry Walton.
Okay.
So he's Dr. Henry Walton, Indiana, air quotes, Jones. And then my second question is, where did George Lucas come up with the name for Indiana? Did his wife recommend the name? He just really liked the state? Or was his dog's name Indiana?
Oh, I want to say it's his dog's name.
It was.
Yeah.
Indiana, the dog, was an Alaskan Malamute who inspired the name for Indiana Jones, and he also inspired Chewbacca. Because he was so fluffy that George Lucas wanted
such terrible noises.
I probably, knowing Alaskan Malamutes. And so he was so fluffy, and he wanted Chewbacca to be in the movie. So two of Harrison Ford's very important things in life were inspired by an Alaskan Malamute named Indiana.
That is good. Very good. Perfect. Well, I have a quote for you.
Okay.
Allow me to pull it up. And unfortunately, the word professor, how it's used, is Professor somebody. So I'm going to replace the name with Professor X.
So not X-Men. Okay, got it.
No, it's not X-Men. I don't have another way to edit out this name. So
Understood.
Anyway, here we go. Is it true that you shouted at Professor X? Yes, he said. And you called her a liar? Yes. Well, sit down and have a biscuit.
Yeah, I know exactly where that's from.
I did edit it a little bit to hide some names, but yes, I'm sure you do know where it's from.
One of my favorite scenes.
Good. Well, we will reveal it to the audience at the end. But first, I shall talk at you about Legally Blonde.
Ooh, okay.
I think you kind of see where I'm going here. Yeah, how I got there. For those who have not seen Legally Blonde, it is a movie that was made in, I believe it was 2001. Yes, 2001, starring Reese Witherspoon. It opens with, it's sunny Southern California, and beautiful Elle Woods, who is Reese Witherspoon's character, is biking through a college campus down kind of sorority lane. And everyone's like having parties, and her hair is blowing in the wind, and it's just so idyllic. And she gets back to her sorority house, and they are all excited. They say, "Look, Elle, you have an invitation." And it's really cheesy. She has this weird little invitation instead of just like a call or a text message or something from her boyfriend, who is Warner Huntington III. And he is taking her out to a very fancy dinner tonight. And so she's like getting all dressed up. She has a perfect dress picked out. It's a beautiful pink color. It's kind of interesting because a lot of just reviews I've heard of this movie other places. Oh my goodness.
Places.
It has been a long day. Other places. It says like, this one scene where she's picking out the dress actually shows that she's not as dumb as like they want you to think she is. And there's kind of a lot of little hidden things throughout the movie like this. But for example, in this one scene, the person at the dress shop, is trying to like sell her this dress for a ridiculous amount of money. And she's like, why would I pay that much for something that was in the such and such collection of this year when I could easily get it off the rack for this much? And it's just kind of like it's kind of some fashion knowledge essentially, but it's like she knows her stuff, like things that she's passionate about, she really researches and understands. So it's just like the things that she is currently passionate about is not what's considered intellectual, essentially. Like, it's just fashion. But that's neither here nor there. She gets the dress for a good price. I
mean, also, it's like a whole mood. It's much easier to research stuff that you're interested in than stuff that you have to know.
Exactly. But it's just like the fashion industry or whatnot is looked down upon by other people, like the law people that we'll get into. But anyway, so she's all prepped and ready for the date. Warner comes and picks her up, and they go out to eat, and it's this really nice restaurant. And he like kind of grabs her by the hand and is like, "Oh, sugar bear, I love you so much." And she's like, and like nodding along. And he says, "And so that's why I'm breaking up with you." And she says, "Yes." And then wait, what? I think I just hallucinated. Because he obviously was breaking up with her. She thought that he was going to propose to her. But apparently he has to break up with her because she's too blonde and he is going to Harvard Law School.
Oh, no.
And turns out he actually gets another girlfriend or has another girlfriend. I'm not quite sure on that, if like he already had this girlfriend and he was really cheating on Elle this whole time.
Honestly, probably.
Yeah, but anyway, it's Vivian. Vivian Kensington, who is from Connecticut. And she is a fancy law school girl. So anyway, Elle says, "You know what? I'm going to show him. I'm going to win him back. I'm going to steal him away from this Vivian." And so to do that, she has to show that she is worthy enough, that she can get into law school too. So instead of just graduating from college and like going on to like be a fashion designer or whatever it was that she had in her goals in life, she actually studies for the LSAT, and you can see like she's really taking it seriously. Like, she takes all the practice tests, and like her sorority sisters are so supportive of her and like grade them for her, and you can see the scores like going up every time she takes another one. And she's like writing her entrance letter, except she makes an entrance video, which is real fancy. There's something in the entrance video where it's like she's kind of doing a thesis statement of like how she is like a good candidate for law school, but she like does all of the narration from a pool where she's wearing a bikini. And so you see all the entrance counselors being like, "Oh, well, she has some pretty impressive grades, and she launched this one fashion design all by herself." And like you see that they're trying to find reasons that like she would be a valid law candidate, but yet they're mystified, like, "Oh my gosh, she's wearing a bikini, she's so hot." But like the things that they're saying are like actually true. And it's like, yeah, she actually did do those things. She really should go to law school. So anyway, she passes the LSAT and she gets in. She's going to Harvard. Yeah, she does it. So she goes in, and it's like classic first day of school. You're familiar with this from our first day of school, where basically we had all the games and get to know you, sit in a circle with your group and say something fun about yourself. And so they're going around.
What animal would you be if you had to live in a zoo? Was a question I was asked at our orientation.
Oh my gosh. I don't remember what questions I was or was not asked.
So obscure that it sticks in my head.
Yeah, I don't remember much about orientation. I did try and block that memory out.
That's valid.
Yeah. But you meet a few different people in the class. So there's this one guy who is like a doctor for children in Africa. I don't know why he then wanted to be a lawyer. There's another lady who's like a feminist and like very women's rights kind of thing. I'm trying to think of some other characters. Those are kind of the two that I think stick out. And then Elle is just like, and I'm Elle, and she like talks about her sorority days, and she has her little chihuahua with her as well, who she takes to college with her. Luckily, he doesn't go in a bag to school with her. He just stays around in the dorm, but he is, a little bag dog, a little chihuahua. So then when she first goes to class, she, like, everyone else has their computers out and they're, like, typing notes furiously. And she takes out, like, this tiny little, like, fluffy notepad with a pen with a feather and just, like, writing down notes in a pink pen. And she didn't complete the reading that was required before the class. And the professor,
mood.
Right? The professor, like, asks a question and, like, zeroes in on her. Like, this girl does not have what it takes. And ask her a question that she doesn't know. And she's like, well, I would appreciate, Elle Woods, if you would become prepared to my class in the future. So she, like, dismisses her from class, and Elle, like, stomps out and is all sad and huffy and goes and sits on a bench outside the law school. And there's this guy who, like, he's sitting there on the bench, too, and, like, sees her being upset and, like, hey, what's wrong? What's up? And Elle's like, oh, I just got kicked out of class. And this guy's like, oh, tell me about it. Some of the professors are pretty hard. So this guy, we learn, is Emmett. And he seems like just kind of another law student. We don't really know much else about him right now. But he kind of gives her some tips of, like, hey, with this professor, you know, keep up on the reading. With this one, make sure you sit in the back of the class because he spits. And, you know, just, like, little tips and tricks to get through. And she's like, oh, thank you. It's really
That's
nice
so
of you. Yeah. So she's feeling better now, and she goes marching through the law school again. And then she runs into Warner again. And he's like, oh my gosh, Elle, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh, I go here. And he's like, what do you mean, like, you go here? And she's like, I'm in Harvard Law. I took the LSAT. And he's like, you don't go to Harvard Law. And she's like, yeah, I passed. I got in just like you. And then Vivian comes up and, like, puts her hand on Warner's shoulder and, like, showing off the engagement ring very prominently. And she's like, oh, who's this? And, like, right there, you know they're going to be enemies because, like, Vivian and giving her such side eye, and Elle's like, oh, this is the girl who took my man. So that's where we kind of set up the problem. Now, Elle is all upset because she didn't realize that they were actually engaged at this point. But then she sees the ring, and that sends her into a whole spiral. She gets in her pink convertible and drives downtown and goes to the first place that she can find that advertises that it's a nail salon. She marches on in, she, like, sits down in a huff and's like, are you free? To the nail salon, nail manicurist, who is Paulette. And Paulette's like, oh yeah, spill the tea, honey. That's not what she says. That's not the slang that they had back then.
But it would have been if it was made in this time.
Exactly. I think she says dish. I think that's what she says.
Oh, yeah, that probably would.
Yeah. So anyway, Elle just, like, basically tells Paulette her whole life story. They became best friends. And Paulette says something like, oh my gosh, imagine if a girl like you can't keep a man, what's the hope for the rest of us? And I just love Paulette. She's so cute. And so anyway, Elle feels better now. She's got her nails done. We kind of see a few little more montages of her, like, not quite fitting in with the law school crowd. And then we kind of cut to the law school dorm, and one day, like, Vivian comes in, she's like, oh, hi, Elle. We're having a little party, and we thought you'd like to come. Oh, and by the way, it's a costume party. And Elle's like, I love costume parties. Like, she does not pick up the sarcasm at all. And she, like, gets all excited. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for this party.
Speaking as a sorority girl, costume parties were great.
Hey, okay, not a sorority girl, but also costume parties were great. My clarinet studio had costume parties, and that was almost like a sorority. Anyway, so Elle, she goes to the nines, and she dresses up as a Playboy bunny, so, like, wearing this little leotard with little bunny ears, and goes up to the Halloween party and knocks on the door, and unfortunately no one else is wearing a costume.
They gasp.
I know. However, she's really confident, so she still, like, kind of rocks it, and she, like, goes on in, she finds Warner, and he's like, why are you dressed like this? And she's like, oh, you know, I just thought it'd be fun.
Just take it in stride.
Exactly. And then after a discussion, like, Warner's kind of like, you know, this place isn't for you. Why don't you just quit before you get turned down? And Elle's like, you're not taking me seriously. What? Her standing in front of him in a pink bunny costume. And after that, she storms out of the party, and she goes to the nearest Best Buy, and she buys a huge computer, and she's still wearing the Playboy bunny costume. And then in line, as she's checking out with this computer, Emmett, the guy from earlier, like, gets in line behind her and is like, what's going on here? And she's like, don't ask. And then we see, like, there's a montage of her studying and, like, really getting down to business. And she's, like, on her treadmill but reading books at the same time. And, like, the C-SPAN is on the TV so she can watch congressional hearings and things. And then you see her, like, in the library and she's helping her other classmates. And, like, she's really going to it. She's really getting down to business. So anyway, then there's another professor, Professor Callahan, and he announces that this summer there's going to be an internship where someone in the law school is going to be able to, like, kind of help him on cases in his law firm. And Elle applies for it. She's, like, encouraged to apply for it. He kind of stops her after class and is like, you know what? I think you could really make it. Why don't you submit your resume? And she's like, oh, I have it right here. And, like, just hands him her resume. So on top of it, I could never have my resume just, like, ready with me like that.
Right?
Yeah.
No. Maybe if I was, like, actively looking for jobs, though.
Yeah, but, like, she wasn't. She just was in law school and had an updated resume. Like,
because she's on top of it, because she's...
I mean, I guess so. Obviously.
She's so much better than I.
So anyway, then the day of the announcement of the internship comes, and you see this wonderful, like, everyone is crowded around the pieces of paper that are hung up, and you see her kind of, like, getting up there and, like, craning her neck to see, and then she turns around and gasps, oh, I got it! So she gets to be one of the interns. Also selected to be the interns are Vivian and Warner, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
I know. So... anyway, then we snap forward to... well, actually, I skipped an important scene. There's a scene with Paulette, the nail manicurist. So they've become really good friends now. And we learn that Paulette is divorced. And she's really, really sad because her ex-husband has taken custody of the dog. And Elle's like, oh, you know, I can't let anybody not be without their sweet babies. You know, remember, she has her purse chihuahua. And so she goes with Paulette to confront the husband, and Paulette, like, you can tell that she was very unhappy in the relationship. She's just, like, can't make eye contact with the husband. Like, it was not a good relationship. But then she's like, I have a lawyer. And it's just Elle. Like, she's not really a lawyer, but she, like, throws all sorts of, like, fancy legal terminology at the guy that probably in reality doesn't make any legal sense at all. But
probably.
The guy is just like, what? What? And Paulette, like, she gains confidence. She's like, it means I'm taking the dog. And so she gets her little pit bull back, and they get to, like, go spend time together. And the pit bull and her, Elle's little chihuahua become best friends, too. And it's so cute. And so then Paulette's really happy, and she realizes that, or Elle realizes that Paulette has been noticing the UPS driver who always comes to the nail salon to drop stuff off. And Elle's like, you like him? You want to get his attention? And this is where the famous bend and snap scene comes in. And she's like, this is a little trick that my mother taught me. You simply drop something on the floor, and I have to pick that up. And so you bend, and so she, like, bends down at the waist, and so, like, her hind end is sticking up in the air, and then snap. And you, like, snap up and then, like, look all perky. And then everyone in the nail salon is, like, going on about it, and, like, one of the hairdressers comes by, and he's like, oh, the bend and snap, ladies, it's a classic. And everyone's, like, getting into it, and it's like, yeah, Elle's really making a difference here for these people. So that was that important scene. I just think it's funny. Now we're on to where she is the intern. Their first case is actually very interesting for Elle because it's to defend a certain Brooke Taylor Wyndham, who is a fitness instructor, and she actually used to be part of Elle's sorority, so kind of one of Elle's senior sorority sisters. And Elle just, like, really looks up to her. She's created this whole fitness empire, and she's just a role model. However, she is being charged for the murder of her husband.
Oh, no.
Yes, exactly. Now, Elle does not believe this at all. She's like, somebody who's that happy just with endorphins doesn't just murder their husband. So
happy people just don't kill their husband.
Yeah, exactly. So Ella's determined to prove her innocent, which, you know, they're her lawyers. They should be proving her innocent. That's their job. But it seems like Callahan isn't buying the story. He's like, it would be really hard to say she's innocent. Like, come on. So anyway, at one point, Elle is asked to try and get Brooke's alibi for, you know, could she possibly have been doing other than murdering her husband that day. And Brooke, she tells Elle, because she has that confidence in her, and it's that she was getting liposuction. So this world-famous fitness instructor gets liposuction. She's like, if anybody knew, it would ruin my whole reputation. And Elle says, don't worry, your secret is safe with me. So Elle goes back to the lawyer meeting, and she's like, oh yeah, I got the alibi. And Callahan's like, well, what is it? And she's like, I can't tell you. I promised that Brooke I wouldn't tell, and I never break my promises. And so Callahan's all frustrated. But then Vivian, she, like, kind of respects that. She, like, meets up with Elle later, and she's like, that was really classy of you. And so you can tell that they're, like, kind of being friends a little bit. And then they, like, start dishing about Warren, and Vivian's like, isn't it funny that he can't wash his own clothes? And Elle, like, laughs with her, and, like, they've kind of bonded at this point. It's like, okay, so they're not so, like, up in arms against each other. And, like, Ella's kind of forgotten about Warner at this point. Like, she doesn't really care. She just wants to win this case. So
right.
again,
she can
like,
do better than Warner anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But another instance where it's like she really is passionate about the things she's passionate about. And, like, sure, her initial goal of getting into Harvard was to win back her man. But now her goal at Harvard is to be a great lawyer. So good for her. Then we cut into the trials. And, of course, we have everyone being interviewed. We bring up Brooke's stepdaughter, Chutney, who is basically as old as Brooke, almost. Like, Brooke is really young, and then the man who was murdered, her husband, was, like, really old. So that's where they're also kind of thinking, like, oh, Brooke killed him for the money, essentially. And Chutney's like, well, it wasn't me, because I was getting a perm, and then I was in the shower, and when I came out, she was standing over his dead body covered in his blood, and he was dead. So that's Chutney's alibi. Elle isn't sure about this at first. She thinks something is fishy, but she can't figure out what. Later that night, she's, like, collecting something from Callahan's office, and like, I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, wait, Elle, I want to just talk about you. What does Elle want? And he, like, awkwardly, like, puts his hand on her thigh, and she's like, no, this is not okay. And she, like, goes rushing out of the office. However, we also cut to Vivian, who was, like, picking something up from the office and, like, realizes that they were in there having some conversation, and she, like, kind of peeks around the corner. All she sees is Callahan, like, feeling her up, and then she leaves. She doesn't realize that Elle, like, ran out in a gasp, and, like, they don't encounter each other after that. Elle gets really upset about this, and she's, like, about to quit law school. She, like, has all of her bags packed somehow and in her convertible, and she's leaving.
That's impressive.
I know, like, she gets it packed real quick. Anyway, Emmett, he's actually been kind of a junior associate this whole time with Callahan's law firm. He's not actually just a student. But he catches her and says, wait, Elle, where are you going? You can't let one sleazy guy make you leave this whole industry. And she's like, wait, you're right. I can't. She eventually, like, kind of comes up with a plan of how she can stay and how she can prove Brooke innocent. And that comes down to, Brooke walks into court the next day and goes to Callahan and says, you're fired. He says, I'm your lawyer. What are you going to do without me? And she says, I have new representation. And Elle, like, walks in her wonderful pink suit. And Callahan's like, she can't represent you. She's just a student. And they say, oh, but actually, according to this one specific law, as long as some other lawyer's overseeing her, she can do whatever she wants. And so Emmett has volunteered to be the overseeing lawyer while Elle gets to run the case.
Very convenient and probably unlikely.
Exactly. So anyway, Elle says, I'd like to bring Chutney up to the stand for questioning. And so she goes on up there, and Elle's like, so where were you on the day of the murder? And she, like, says her whole thing again. And Elle says, wait, so you got a perm? and then you were in the shower. And Chutney says, yes. She's like, but you had just gotten a perm that morning, correct? And she says, yes. And like everyone's like getting frustrated because Elle's basically just asking the same question, the same type of question over and over. And the judge is like, I think we've established that she has had a perm and then she was in the shower. And then Elle like gets some swagger, like she gets some confidence here because she's like, but haven't you been getting perms since you were like 12 years old and say every 3 months or so? So that's about, 20 so perms throughout your whole life or however many hours. Sure. And Chutney says, yeah. And Elle goes, and isn't it the first rule of perm maintenance that once you have it done, you cannot wash your hair for the first 24 hours for fear of deactivating the chemicals? And Chutney says, yes. And Elle says, but look, her curls are still there. It means she did not shower that day because the chemical was still active, which means that Chutney could not have been in the shower, meaning that Chutney did kill her father. And like Chutney was like getting all like hyped up. She was like hyperventilating and she suddenly bursts out like, it's because I thought it was her coming through the door, and points at Brooke. So apparently Chutney wanted to kill her stepmother Brooke, but accidentally killed her father instead.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Brooke is proven innocent. Elle is celebrated for winning the case, and everyone is happy. And Warner, like, comes up to her and is like, Elle, I was so wrong. You are the girl for me. Like, just dumping Vivian to the sideline here, who he was engaged to. Like, come on. And Elle's like, no, seriously, I can do better than you, and I have more important things like law school to finish. So now Warner has no one. Then we cut to 2 years later, and it's the graduation ceremony. Elle is like graduating highest of her class, and she's the speaker, and she has a really stupid speech, and just like, after all this time, I'm happy to say, we did it. It's like, come on, you could have thought of something much better than that.
Right.
But whatever. It kind of has like a classic early 2000s like summary of everything where it's like, Emmett is proposing to Elle tonight, and Elle is going to have a job at the most prestigious law firm, and Paulette got to marry the UPS driver, and just like everything wraps up really nice, and it's all happy. And Warner barely graduates, has no job offers, and nobody likes him. That's Legally Blonde.
It's a good movie. It's got such classic lines.
It is very good.
You got into Harvard Law. What? Like it's hard?
Yeah, exactly. I forgot that one. Like it's hard? It's perfect. There's actually another... I think there's just one other movie, Legally Blonde 2. I don't think there's Legally Blonde 3 yet.
I think they made a musical of it, too.
There is the musical, yes. I'm pretty sure they were trying to make Legally Blonde 3, but no one was actually sure if they wanted it. Legally Blonde 2 is like they go to the White House and they petition for some bill to be passed or something like that, and she uses hair as another way to get people to do things. She's all about the hair. But I think the first one is definitely good. The best.
It is very good.
Yeah. I do have a little bit of questioning for you.
Okie pokey.
All right. So the first one, what is the name of Elle's dog? And it's a little chihuahua, remember?
Okay.
Do you know or do you need some hints?
I need hints.
Okay. It's Buster, Fluffy, Bruiser, or Roxy.
Is it Buster?
No, it's Bruiser.
It's Bruiser. I knew it was B. I was like, it's one of the two.
Right. In the second one, what they're petitioning for is Bruiser's bill, which is like against animal scientific testing or something.
Oh, right.
Yeah. All right. The second question is, what is so outstanding about Elle's resume? And this is the resume that she hands off to Callahan when she's applying for the internship.
Isn't it pink and covered in perfume?
Yes! Yes, it is. You didn't even need my questions for that.
I got that one on lock.
He's like, look, it's her resume. It smells good.
Honestly, like, we associate scents with good things. It's not a bad thought.
I remember I think it was like 7th grade, we had to write, like we were learning how to do like some sort of journalistic writing or something like that, and we were put into groups and we like make a small newspaper, and we called ours the Daily Peach, and we printed it on pink paper and we did spray it with peach perfume
Aww.
in reference to this movie.
That's amazing, and I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Legally Blonde. That's what I had for Professor.
Beautiful. I love it.
Yes. So, would you like our quote again, or do you know where and what it is?
I know it is Professor McGonagall telling Harry, "Did you shout at Professor Umbridge from Harry Potter Order of the Phoenix?"
Yep, it is. And McGonagall is hella proud of Harry for doing that. She hates Umbridge.
McGonagall is one of my favorite characters. She's amazing. Maggie Smith does an amazing job portraying her. I love her so much.
Mm-hmm. She's just so sassy. So
she
good.
Is.
All right. So, that's it for Professor. But what is our next word?
The next word is station.
Ding ding. Station.
Like a train station, maybe? I'll have to
I
think
think
about that
so.
one.
Or maybe it's your station in life.
Ooh, that's a good thought, too.
Ooh, if I'm going with that, I have a good one.
Ooh, okay. I'm excited. Remember to hit us up on social media and let us know what you talk about for Professor. We got a Twitter handle and a Facebook page that you can find at #NerdOfTheWeek. We do have an Instagram. Eventually we'll do something with it, but it's also Nerd of the Week. And then you can tweet at us #Nerd of the Week or NOTWP. And then we also have a TikTok where I make some fun TikTok shorts at TikTok. Vampire Sheep. Sheep is spelled with 3s instead of E's.
Wait, and YouTube. Did you talk about YouTube?
Oh, yes. And we have most of the podcast up on YouTube now. I'm working on getting the rest of them up on there. So if you want to listen to us on YouTube as well and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that's another place that you can find us.
Mm-hmm. Maybe eventually we will have more video-y kind of content, but that all revolves around us getting more listeners. Woo. You know how we get more listeners?
Pyramid schemes.
It's not a pyramid scheme. It's like a pyramid scheme, but it's not a pyramid scheme. But basically, listener, you just have to ask 5 friends to listen to the show, and then they have to ask 5 friends, and I promise everyone will listen to what we're saying, and you'll all get our knowledge and our thoughts.
And it's better than a pyramid scheme because it's free.
Yes, it is free. We are not asking for any money, just listeners. Please. Please, more listeners. We crave the listeners.
Oh God, that's getting a little creepy. All right.
Sorry.
We don't crave you, but we appreciate you listening to our podcast and sharing it with other people.
Okay, well, anyway.
I've been Stephanie.
And I've been Allison.
And thank you for listening to our podcast. Remember, we're not a pyramid scheme. Goodbye.
Bye.